Day 8 of the federal trial against Sean "Diddy" Combs wasn't just another courtroom update, it was an all-out implosion. What initially appeared to be a celebrity abuse case spiraled into something much darker and more organized. The prosecution brought forward powerful testimonies, damning visual evidence, and forensic detail that shook even the most hardened observers. For the first time, the jury and the public witnessed how the chaos surrounding Diddy might actually be part of a structured system built on secrecy, coercion, and fear. One by one, witnesses came forward with deeply unsettling stories. From emotional abuse and physical threats to hidden prescription bottles and hotel room setups filled with illicit materials, each account layered another piece onto what prosecutors are now positioning as a potential RICO case. The visual evidence alone, pills, firearms, burner phones, and industrial quantities of baby oil, was so specific, so meticulously cataloged, it was impossible to ignore. And when former insiders began to confirm what had long been whispered about Diddy's lifestyle, the courtroom fell silent. This wasn't tabloid gossip anymore. This was federal court, and the stakes had never been higher. The defense tried to poke holes, but their efforts only seemed to highlight the scale of what was being exposed. Every cross-examination misstep, every legal objection, every shaky rebuttal added to the perception that something massive was being unraveled in real time. By the end of the day, the trial had transformed from a scandal into a full-blown reckoning. The term criminal enterprise no longer felt like exaggeration, it felt like a warning. Because if what the prosecution laid out is just the beginning, Diddy could be facing not just public disgrace, but the downfall of his entire empire. The courtroom fell into a heavy silence as Regina Ventura, mother of Cassie Ventura, took the stand. What she revealed wasn't just heartbreaking, it was horrifying. In 2011, the Ventura family found themselves cornered. Out of sheer fear for Cassie's safety, they took out a home equity loan and handed Sean "Diddy" Combs $20,000 in cash. The reason? Regina said Diddy had threatened to release explicit videos of her daughter after discovering her relationship with rapper Kid Cudi. It wasn't a settlement, it was a payoff under pressure. And for the Ventura family, it was the only way they believed they could keep Cassie safe. Regina's voice cracked as she recounted the nightmarish decision to mortgage their home. She described the gut-wrenching moment of signing the loan papers, not for a car, not for college, but to make a terrifying man go away. The emotional toll was immediate. She testified that she felt physically sick handing over the money, knowing the power imbalance at play. Diddy wasn't just a famous figure. He was someone with resources, influence, and according to her testimony, a dangerous temper. And this wasn't some distant accusation. This was coming directly from a mother who believed her daughter's life was in danger. Her testimony didn't just echo Cassie's prior claims, it strengthened them with vivid, first-hand validation. Regina confirmed that Diddy had allegedly made direct threats, including saying he would blow up Kid Cudi's car. That statement alone triggered murmurs in the courtroom, but it was the emotional detail, the fear in her voice, the weight of a mother's desperation, that hit hardest. This wasn't a story about money, it was about survival, and the jury felt it. Adding to the weight of her claims, Regina testified that she took photographic evidence of Cassie's bruises later that same year. These weren't just verbal accusations, they were documented signs of alleged abuse. The photos, she explained, were taken not for publicity, but as a way to preserve proof in case something even worse happened. For Regina, it was never about exposing Diddy to the world. It was about preparing for the day she might need to protect her daughter in court. That day had finally come. What made this testimony even more powerful was the timeline. Everything Regina said aligned with previous claims made by Cassie, both in public and in court. The $20,000 payment, the threats against Kid Cudi, the bruises, each detail reinforced a disturbing pattern of control and intimidation. And this time it wasn't Cassie saying it. It was a third party, a mother, someone with no reason to lie and everything to lose. By the end of Regina Ventura's testimony, the tone of the courtroom had shifted. No longer was this trial being seen as just a celebrity dispute. It was about power, fear, and the lengths a family will go to protect one of their own. Her story wasn't just compelling, It was credible. And for the prosecution, it became a cornerstone of the narrative they were building. That Diddy's influence wasn't just abusive, it was terrifyingly far-reaching. David James didn't take the stand as a bitter ex-employee. He testified as someone who had seen too much for too long. As a former assistant to Sean Diddy Combs, James described a working environment built on fear, secrecy, and illegal activity. His testimony stripped away the glamour of celebrity life and exposed what he called a culture of chaos. From late-night errands involving drugs to strict cash-only rules to avoid paper trails, James made it clear: discretion wasn't just expected, it was enforced. James recalled one night that still haunts him. He entered a hotel suite to find Cassie Ventura unconscious on the bed, a naked man fleeing the scene, and Diddy calmly showering in the next room. The implication was chilling, and when pressed, James said he had no idea what happened before he arrived. But what stood out was how routine this all seemed, how normalized the dysfunction had become among Diddy's inner circle. According to James, no questions were asked and no consequences followed. The courtroom listened closely as James described his role in helping maintain the illusion of control. He testified about frequently picking up condoms and drugs, never using company credit cards, only cash. Every transaction was designed to leave no trace. The objective wasn't just privacy, it was protection from legal exposure. He said it wasn't uncommon to be sent out to retrieve MDMA, marijuana, or prescription pills on demand, often at strange hours and from unnamed contacts. What shocked many in the courtroom was the extent to which Diddy allegedly controlled his staff. James revealed that he was once forced to take a lie detector test to prove his loyalty. He also admitted to filing a false police report, at Diddy's direction, against one of the chef's staff. It wasn't a one-time mistake. James said it was part of a larger pattern. If you wanted to stay employed, you did what you were told, even if it meant breaking the law. In one particularly tense moment, James recounted how Diddy's team once armed themselves with guns after an encounter with Suge Knight. He described a frenzy of panic and paranoia, with Diddy allegedly ordering his team to prepare for a violent confrontation. It wasn't just a show of power, it was survival mode. The way James told it, working for Diddy meant being ready for anything, including potential shootouts, and trusting no one outside the circle. By the time James stepped down, the image of Diddy as a mogul began to fracture. No longer was he just the flashy executive behind hit records and private jets. In James's testimony, he became a man obsessed with control, operating in a world where threats, manipulation, and illegal demands were the norm. The courtroom began to realize that if even half of what James said was true, this trial wasn't about protecting a brand. It was about dismantling an entire ecosystem of fear. When Sheree Hayes, a professional dancer known as the Punisher, took the stand, the courtroom braced for drama. But what followed was far more unsettling than anyone expected. Hayes revealed that his first encounter with Sean Diddy Combs and Cassie in 2012 was nothing like the standard performance gig he thought he was hired for. He had been told it was a birthday party appearance. Instead, he walked into an intimate setup orchestrated for something entirely different. From the moment Cassie opened the door in just a robe and wig, it was clear he had entered a world built on silence, performance, and unspoken power dynamics. According to Hayes, Cassie handed him instructions, not to speak to her husband and to follow her lead in setting the mood. He testified that she left $800 in the bathroom, asked him to wear nothing but underwear or a towel, and began applying baby oil to herself before doing the same to him. Minutes later, Diddy entered the room wearing a veil and watched in silence while engaging in explicit behavior. Hayes said the encounter lasted between 25 to 45 minutes, and afterward, he was handed another $200 in cash. The entire experience was strange, transactional, and hauntingly controlled. What made Hayes' testimony even more chilling was the consistency. This wasn't a one-off incident. He described returning for similar encounters a dozen more times. The environment never changed. Same hotels, same routine, same unspoken rules. Cassie remained quiet. Diddy remained in the background, and the boundaries of consent and coercion remained unclear. Hayes said he was paid well, but the emotional weight lingered. He didn't see these events as typical adult encounters. They felt planned, rehearsed, and emotionally detached. Hayes also testified about the moment everything stopped. After one encounter where he experienced performance issues, the calls ceased. He was never contacted again. The sudden dismissal emphasized just how transactional the arrangement had been. There was no connection, no relationship, just a role to be filled and discarded. His worth, he felt, had been tied entirely to his ability to perform, and when that faded, so did his place in their world. The defense attempted to discredit Hayes by pointing out the nature of his work, but his calm, detailed, and consistent testimony made an impact. Jurors took note of the dates, the payment amounts, and the emotionally cold tone of the events he described. The term freak-off, a word the prosecution has subtly referenced in connection with other testimonies, suddenly had a face and a story behind it. Hayes wasn't just another dancer with a wild story. He was a first-hand witness to what may become one of the prosecution's most powerful examples of control, manipulation, and sexual exploitation. What Hayes described went beyond gossip and crossed into disturbing legal territory. If corroborated, his experiences could add weight to the allegations of abuse and trafficking tactics. His testimony gave structure to a pattern, an orchestrated, repeatable routine allegedly directed by a man who maintained silence while exerting control. For prosecutors building a case rooted in intent, power, and enterprise, the Punisher delivered more than just shock value. He delivered evidence of a calculated system hiding in plain sight. When HSI agent Gannon took the stand, the tone of the courtroom shifted from testimony to hard, undeniable evidence. The raid on Diddy's Star Island mansion wasn't just routine. It was a full-scale operation involving 80 to 90 federal agents arriving by land and sea. Their target? Not a person, but the secrets buried inside one of the most exclusive homes in Miami. What they uncovered stunned the courtroom and reinforced what witnesses had only been able to suggest with words. This time, the proof was physical, and it was damning. Agent Gannon described in chilling detail what investigators found behind the closed doors of the master closet. High heels, adult toys, and multiple cell phones hidden inside boots. The phones, some of them older models, were likely kept for discreet communication. But it was the contents of a designer Gucci bag that drew audible gasps from the jury. Inside it, a prescription bottle filled with liquid methamphetamine and MDMA. This wasn't accidental or recreational. It was organized, hidden, and potent. The forensic team also recovered pills stamped with the Tesla logo. Lab results confirmed they contained the active ingredient found in Xanax, a powerful anti-anxiety drug often abused for its sedative effects. Adding to the growing list of illicit items was a $100 bill coated in cocaine residue. Each item, on its own, could be dismissed as personal use. But together they told a different story, one of consistent drug possession, concealment, and preparation. And the discoveries didn't stop there. Gannon testified about a dark wood box labeled Puppy, which investigators opened to find 31 bottles of Astroglide and 25 bottles of baby oil. These weren't travel-sized or casually placed. They were stored intentionally, in bulk, suggesting premeditated use for repeated scenarios. Combined with what other witnesses had described, the items now had context, and it was disturbing. Prosecutors implied the products were not for private use, but for orchestrated events involving others. Perhaps the most serious discovery was the loaded .45 caliber handgun found wrapped in a towel inside a suitcase. Gannon explained that the way it was hidden suggested it wasn't stored for safety, but rather kept accessible while avoiding detection. When asked if any fingerprints had been recovered or if any photos of Diddy holding the weapon existed, Gannon said no, but confirmed the gun was real, loaded, and found on Diddy's property. The presence of an unregistered firearm could open the door to separate federal charges, including illegal possession depending on Diddy's status. By the time Agent Gannon stepped down, the prosecution had done something critical. They had moved beyond words. No longer were the jurors hearing stories without proof. They had seen the photos, the forensic results, the seized evidence with their own eyes. This wasn't just about what Diddy might have done. What was meant to be a powerful moment for the prosecution quickly turned into a vulnerability they hadn't prepared for. Dr. Don Hughes, a respected forensic psychologist, took the stand to explain the psychological effects of long-term abuse. Why victims often stay, how trauma distorts memory, and what coping mechanisms are used to survive repeated cycles of harm. Her qualifications were extensive. Her language was clinical, measured, and confident. But under the weight of cross-examination, that confidence began to crack, and so did the prosecution's momentum. Dr. Hughes initially offered strong insight into the minds of abuse survivors. She explained how victims may minimize what happened, delay coming forward, or even defend their abuser due to trauma bonding. She discussed concepts like placating behavior, emotional isolation, and financial dependence as forms of psychological entrapment. For a brief moment, the courtroom leaned in. Her words offered context for the disturbing patterns outlined by previous witnesses, giving jurors a lens through which to understand the silence and compliance from victims like Cassie. But Jonathan Bach, newly added to Diddy's defense team and known for his aggressive courtroom style, was ready. He questioned the objectivity of Dr. Hughes, citing her history of exclusively testifying on behalf of alleged female victims. Under pressure, she admitted she had never testified for a man accused of sexual misconduct. That admission, though factually accurate, immediately raised concerns about bias. It gave the defense just enough leverage to suggest she was less of an expert and more of a hired gun. The pressure didn't stop there. Bach questioned whether Dr. Hughes had crossed a line in her pre-trial preparation, hinting that she may have helped prosecutors structure parts of their argument. When asked if she reviewed or contributed to any of their filings, Dr. Hughes hesitated before acknowledging that she had been in regular communication with the legal team. The implication was clear. If she was involved in building the case, could she really be considered an independent expert? Adding fuel to the fire, the defense introduced a 2015 training session where Dr. Hughes instructed domestic violence advocates on how to deliver testimony effectively. While not unethical on its own, this detail painted her as someone well-versed in courtroom strategy, not just psychology. Bach used this to argue that her testimony was scripted and coached, not clinical. The subtle shift in perception was crucial. What began as expert analysis slowly took on the appearance of advocacy, and jurors could feel the change in tone. By the end of her testimony, Dr. Hughes had done both damage and good. She validated the emotional patterns of abuse that had been presented throughout the trial. But her credibility, arguably her most important asset, had been shaken. And in a case this complex, perception is everything. For the prosecution, it was a misstep that could haunt their narrative. For the defense, it was their first real opening. A reminder to the jury that not everything said on the stand is beyond question. What began as a seemingly harmless name mentioned by Cassie, Frank Black, suddenly became one of the most explosive revelations in Diddy's federal trial. On day 8th, prosecutors confirmed that during the raid of Diddy's Star Island home, they uncovered a prescription bottle for clonazepam, a powerful anti-anxiety drug classified as a Schedule I-4 controlled substance. But it wasn't prescribed to Sean Combs. It was written to Frank Black, the very alias Cassie had claimed Diddy frequently used. The name wasn't a joke or a rumor. It was real. It was on a federal document. And that changed everything. The prescription wasn't just fake in name. It was connected to a luxury concierge clinic in Santa Monica, California called Lifespan Medicine. This clinic caters to high-profile clients, offering around-the-clock access to medications and health services under a veil of discretion. But that discretion may now be at the heart of a federal crime. According to U.S. law, writing or filling a prescription under a false identity is not only unethical, it's a felony. The moment prosecutors linked Diddy's alias to that bottle, it became a tangible, prosecutable piece of evidence. Clonazepam, the drug in question, isn't harmless. It's a highly regulated substance due to its risk of dependence, misuse, and withdrawal. And if Diddy was obtaining it under a fake name, he may have been doing it to avoid tracking or to prevent associations with other prescriptions. Prosecutors are now digging deeper, asking whether this was a one-time offense or part of a larger pattern of obtaining controlled substances off the radar. The presence of this bottle during a federal raid wasn't just incriminating. It could become the cornerstone of a broader charge. What shocked observers was how easily this alias connected to real-world criminal implications. Title 21 of the U.S. Code makes it illegal to obtain a controlled substance by misrepresentation, fraud, or deceit. The use of an alias, especially in combination with a luxury medical provider, checks every box for misrepresentation. And unlike vague accusations or second-hand accounts, this was physical evidence with a paper trail and a prescription number. The courtroom quickly understood the magnitude of what had been discovered. The defense scrambled to downplay it, suggesting that celebrities often use aliases to protect their privacy. But that argument falls apart when applied to controlled substances. Unlike hotel reservations or airline bookings, medical records and prescriptions are subject to strict legal standards. You cannot legally obtain a controlled drug using a false identity. The pharmacy must verify the patient's legal name, date of birth, and government-issued ID before filling such a prescription. If that protocol was bypassed, someone committed a felony, and possibly not just one person. This discovery also raises serious questions about the clinic itself. Was Lifespan Medicine aware that Frank Black wasn't a real legal identity? If so, they may have knowingly violated federal prescription laws and could now be facing their own investigation. If not, how did such a high-profile patient secure a prescription under a false name without raising red flags? Prosecutors are expected to subpoena the clinic's internal records, including prescription logs, patient intake forms, and any communications with Diddy's staff. This bombshell could pull more people into the case. Even more concerning, prosecutors believe this act may not have been about personal drug use. It may have been about concealment. If Diddy used drugs obtained under aliases during events tied to other allegations, such as the freak-offs referenced earlier, then the use of false identities strengthens the case for premeditated and organized behavior. It ties directly into RICO by showing a deliberate structure of deception designed to enable illegal activity while avoiding detection. By the end of Day 8, Frank Black was no longer just a name whispered in court. It became a symbol of how layered and hidden this alleged criminal operation might be. It wasn't just about a fake name or a bottle of pills. It was about the infrastructure behind it. The doctors, the staff, the couriers, all possibly part of a web designed to shield one man from scrutiny. And now, with that alias exposed, the prosecution may have found the thread that could unravel it all. What casual observers dismissed as typical celebrity chaos is now being pieced together by federal prosecutors as something far more calculated and far more dangerous. To the prosecution, this isn't just a collection of isolated bad decisions. This is the framework of a criminal enterprise. The term they're building toward is chilling, RICO, Racketeer-Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. And based on what's emerged so far in court, they may already have enough to meet the legal threshold. Under RICO law, prosecutors must prove at least 2 predicate acts, crimes committed as part of an ongoing criminal enterprise. These aren't misdemeanors or moral missteps, they're felonies. And in Diddy's case, the prosecutors are stacking allegations like prescription fraud, illegal drug possession, witness intimidation, coercion, and financial manipulation. Each testimony, each piece of evidence, builds on the last. This isn't just about bad behavior, it's about deliberate strategy, protected by fame and executed with precision. Testimonies from former staff, assistants, dancers, and Cassie's own mother have painted a disturbing portrait of control. But it's the consistency across stories that's most damning. Whether it's a dancer describing being paid and silenced after bizarre encounters, or an assistant recounting forced loyalty through lie detectors and cash-only drug pickups, the common thread is clear. Silence was expected, and compliance was enforced. These weren't personal choices, they were workplace norms. More than once, witnesses have alluded to cleanup teams and NDA-like verbal instructions. Hotel rooms prepped in advance, supplies ordered and stocked for very specific use. Staff carefully instructed to avoid hotel workers and keep everything in-house. The implication? This wasn't random, it was systematic. And systems, when built around crime, are exactly what RICO laws were created to prosecute. Diddy's empire, prosecutors argue, wasn't just entertainment. It was a network of power used to enable and conceal exploitation. The use of aliases like Frank Black and Frank White only strengthens that case. Aliases aren't illegal on their own, but when tied to prescription fraud or concealment of criminal activity, they become tools of obstruction. Prosecutors are expected to show that these names weren't just nicknames, but legal shields used to bypass medical regulations and protect illicit behavior. If proven, this falls directly into the category of deception-based predicate acts under RICO. Legal analysts watching the trial closely have pointed out the eerie resemblance to past high-profile RICO cases. From mob bosses to music executives, RICO has been used to dismantle structures that rely on loyalty, fear, and silence. The moment Diddy's actions can be shown as organized, meaning staff were instructed, protected, and compensated for enabling wrongdoing, the door to a RICO indictment swings wide open, and the prosecution seems to be walking right through it. Prosecutors also appear to be laying the groundwork to demonstrate enterprise control. This means showing that Diddy not only participated in the conduct, but dictated it. From who booked the hotels, to who picked up the drugs, to who cleaned the rooms, the decision-making all allegedly traces back to him. That level of control is exactly what RICO prosecutions hinge on, proving the accused wasn't just involved, but orchestrated the illegal conduct of others to protect and sustain their position of power. If successful, the consequences won't be limited to fines or reputation damage. A federal RICO conviction can carry decades in prison. For Diddy, this means his entire legacy, built over decades, could be stripped down to court exhibits, testimonies, and sentencing guidelines. And for those who once worked under him, the fear that kept them silent might now be replaced by subpoenas and immunity deals. The empire isn't just crumbling, it's being dissected, piece by piece, crime by crime. The courtroom held its breath as George Kaplan stepped forward, a name few expected, but one that may end up being the prosecution's most strategic move yet. As Diddy's former executive assistant, Kaplan didn't just witness the inner workings of the empire, he lived them. From 2013 to 2015, Kaplan wasn't an outsider. He was embedded deep within Diddy's personal and professional world, working long hours to ensure everything, from luxury travel to after-hours parties, ran without a hitch. But what he revealed under oath suggested those duties included much more than logistics. Kaplan testified that his job often involved setting up hotel rooms in cities like Los Angeles, Miami, and New York. But these weren't ordinary check-ins. According to him, he would arrive early to prepare the room with specific items, candles, clothing, and, most notably, baby oil, Gatorade, and various drugs. It was part of a recurring ritual. These setups weren't spontaneous, they were routine. The implication was clear. Diddy had a system, and Kaplan helped maintain it. What caught the courtroom off guard was Kaplan's calm, matter-of-fact delivery, as he described cleaning up brown powder left behind on bathroom counters, disposing of drug residue, and organizing sex-related supplies. None of this seemed unusual to him at the time, he said, because it had been normalized. He wasn't just cleaning up after a party. He was preserving a brand, managing a reputation, and covering the tracks of behavior that had now become the focus of a federal investigation. Kaplan also detailed the pressure he operated under. One wrong move, even something as trivial as bringing the wrong brand of water, could result in verbal reprimands and threats to his job. Diddy, he testified, didn't tolerate what he saw as incompetence. The message was always clear. Perfection was mandatory, and failure to deliver could result in being cut off or worse. The atmosphere, Kaplan said, was one of high-stakes loyalty. His most damning admission came when he confirmed that he had personally purchased MDMA and other substances on Diddy's behalf. These weren't gray areas or assumptions. These were direct drug pickups arranged in both Los Angeles and Miami. Kaplan described meeting with anonymous couriers, handing over cash, and delivering bags of pills to Diddy. These transactions, he stated, were done under strict instructions with no written communication and no third-party involvement. Everything had to stay off the books. Prosecutors used Kaplan's testimony to connect the dots between Diddy's alleged lifestyle and the organized methods behind it. With every detail Kaplan shared, the court saw not just a celebrity living recklessly, but a deliberate pattern of concealment, delegation, and structure. It fit neatly with the RICO narrative they were constructing. That Diddy wasn't just involved in illegal activity, He had built a system around it and staffed it with people whose job was to keep it quiet. Kaplan's credibility played a huge role in how his testimony landed. Unlike others who may have had personal grievances or financial motives, Kaplan presented himself as someone burdened by what he had witnessed. He didn't appear angry, he appeared exhausted. And that fatigue, that quiet delivery made his words all the more believable. Jurors weren't hearing accusations. They were hearing confessions from a man who once helped orchestrate the image Diddy projected to the world. By the time Kaplan stepped down, the prosecution had gained something more valuable than just another story. They had an insider. Someone who didn't just witness events, but who executed the logistics that kept the machine running. And in a trial where proving structure, intent, and enterprise is key, Kaplan may have delivered exactly what the prosecution needed to push their RICO case forward. Not just confirmation of illegal acts, but confirmation that they were planned, repeated, and expertly hidden. Day 8 wasn't just another step in the trial, it was a turning point. The courtroom no longer felt like a place for celebrity drama. It felt like ground zero for the unraveling of a possible criminal empire. Between detailed witness accounts and tangible evidence, prosecutors are steadily building a case that points not to chaos, but to coordination. And if their RICO strategy holds, what we're seeing isn't just the exposure of a scandal, it's the dissection of a playbook designed to protect, conceal, and control. Everything from alias prescriptions to silent staffers and choreographed hotel setups suggests an organized structure built to operate outside the law. This isn't about one explosive accusation or a single moment of misconduct. It's about a series of calculated decisions that, taken together, paint a picture of systemic abuse of power. For the first time, the myth of invincibility surrounding Diddy is beginning to crumble in real time. And it's happening under the scrutiny of a federal court, not the court of public opinion. With more witnesses set to testify and deeper investigations unfolding, this trial is only gaining momentum. What comes next could expose more than just one man. It could shake the foundation of an entire industry. If you want to stay ahead of what could become one of the biggest entertainment trials of our time, don't look away now. Subscribe and follow for daily updates, because this is only the beginning.